Alright, hello people, are we coming through? Five by five, what? Oh, do you have the stream?
No, I was about to go to it, but it doesn't appear to have popped up on YouTube yet. Excellent, thank you.
Oh, it's a radio thing.
The more you know.
I thought it would be something I wouldn't like. I will give people a minute to come in, anyone who wants to listen in, but for you folks here right now, do you have any questions about the comic? Anything that you think might not be answered, or just something you want to know just in case, so like we can add it to the list down the line? Anything that's not an outright spoiler.
Asking the important questions, I see.
Will Groose be in it? I mean, there's a couple semi-returning characters. None of them... I feel like none of them quite as blatant as Groose would be, though. Also, apologies in advance, folks. Allergy season has kicked in officially. Hopefully my sinuses have finished draining, but just in case. Apologies if I forget to mute before I sneeze. Just finalizing the list that we're going to talk about here. Do you think we'll get a Pikmin game for the Switch? And what's your favorite Harvest Moon game from the series? I hope we get a Pikmin game for the Switch. It's about time we got a sequel. And I don't know my favorite Harvest Moon game. They all kind of even out around the end.
But do you know your least favorite one?
Oh, what was the... Island of Happiness? Actually, I only played that one a little bit. What was the one on the PS1? Back to Nature. That one does not hold up at all. It's isometric, but also it controls isometrically. There's no middle ground, so it's very easy to... No, it's actually very hard to play, but it's very easy to mess things up. But we might have a couple new people in here. Before we start, we're going to start them in here. Do any of you folks have questions about the comic? Anything you'd like to know? So that we can check and make sure it's on the list, and if it's not, we can add it. I have played Trio of Towns. I didn't play it very long. You know, I kind of do want to add Will Groosby in it, because it's something we could quickly go over. Thanks, Kirk. Yeah, this is, if anything, this is a good time as any to catch up on it, because Chapter 2 is sort of like the beginning, the chronological beginning of the story. Chapter 1 is in medias res, but we're currently in a bit of a break. We just finished Chapter 2, and then when we come back, Laura's actually going to redo the prologue. So it'll be a little while before this story continues, but so like now's a good time to catch up as any.
Alright, I still need to actually do the cover at some point. Whoops!
Oh yeah. Like I think I said like, oh yeah, I'll do something quick just to put up on Smack Jeeves, and I keep forgetting.
Procrastination.
Thank you, Kimberly. I haven't listened back through Tale of Two Towns in a long time. And I was just thinking about it the other day. Oh yeah, I Let's Played that. I think we're about ready. Here's the updated list. I don't know if I'm gonna get Pokemon Sword and Shield. I guess I'll wait until reviews come in, see how it compares to the other ones. Alright, but I think we can get started here.
All right,
Go ahead and get your recording going.
it's up.
I'll get a stream backup recording too. Alright. You know the 3, 2, 1 sync?
Yep.
Alright. 3, 2, 1, sync. Alrighty. Now let me fix the word wrap on this. Alright, you are listening to A Thorn in the Brain. I'm your host, Austin, and I'm joined today by a friend and collaborator of mine, Lore Cox, aka Mischievous Art.
Hello.
You may have seen his art in TheStrawhatNO's Let's Plays of Zelda, Triforce Heroes, Phantom Hourglass, and Spirit Tracks. He did the cover art for my album, Buried Secrets and Old Lies, and he even did the logo for this very podcast. Apologies for not really using it very much until recently.
No worries.
Now, I've mentioned it here and there. Lore and I make a Legend of Zelda fan comic called Book of the Traitor. I'm the writer, Lore's the artist. The comic's been going since September 2016, but we've waited until now to talk about it openly like this, because I wanted to wait until Chapter 2 was finished. Now that it is, I'm eager to talk about the history of the comic, the characters, the ideas, anything that isn't an outright spoiler, because I've had this comic in my head in some form or another for like half of my life. Let's see. So, let's actually introduce the comic. What is it? What's it about? So, the idea is Book of the Traitor takes place in, like, a modern era, circa 80s, 90s, roughly, following on from Twilight Princess. It's what would happen if Hyrule was gone for good, and eventually that region finally had an industrial revolution. Because I've had it in my mind, and this was kind of confirmed with Breath of the Wild in some way, that Hyrule is specifically stuck in some medieval stasis, and there's something about Hyrule that's keeping it that way. And it was almost confirmed in Breath of the Wild, where the backstory of the Sheikah is they came up with this incredible technology, but then the king, he feared it, so he... what's the word? So he kicked them out, and he buried the technology and all that, and so Hyrule stayed roughly the same. So this comic is what would happen if Hyrule was finally gone and there was nothing to stop the technology from advancing. What would the... Yeah, Kara in the chat says vaguely contemporary world. What would that look like in a Zelda world? And the setting specifically is called the Republic of New Ordon. It's like what would happen if the Ordona province from Twilight Princess, if that formed its own region, and then eventually, after Hyrule, there would be a bunch of other civilizations, cities, and governments, and eventually the Ordonians took over, and now we have New Ordon. That's what this current country is. Like, that's the rough backstory. Of course, it's all war-torn, because there's war constantly in the backstory of all the Zeldas. Let's see. There are 4 main characters. There's, of course, a Link. In this one, he does talk. He's kind of like an upbeat, uneducated goober with personal issues. Kind of a chatty smartass. When I started thinking of the comic, he had a lot of Tony Stark in him. I'm trying to pull that back, because it's been overplayed quite a bit in the last 10, 11 years. So I'm trying to play up the more good-natured, but smart-assy side of him. He's not like the only protagonist, though. There are like 4 core protagonists. The second one is his husband, Mike, who's a little more on, he's like the deadpan side. He's a university student who's studying physics, and he also has issues. And we'll talk a little more about them and their relationship in a little bit, because as soon as I said husband, I know a couple of people, like, their ears perked up. Third character is Link's sort of like evil twin. Is his doppelganger named Nick. The comic starts with him captured, and chapter 1 starts with Link rescuing him. That's how the comic kicks off. He also has personal issues, but he also has physical issues, which we'll also discuss a bit. We'll also discuss in a little bit. Warehouse says, so kind of like Steve Rogers with a bit of Stark in Link. I guess so. Leaning a little more on Tony Stark, I guess, but minus the education. That's I think that's something I forgot to mention. Mike, he's a university student. He's educated. Link, he's more of a street rat. So like he's streetwise, but he's not educated. And the fourth main character is Mike's protector, Sheik. He's an ancient Sheikah. He comes to New Ordon all the way from ancient Hyrule, and he's the guy who sets everyone on their adventure. He's loyal, spiritual, no nonsense, and he's good at hiding that he even has issues, but he does. Now, the villain for the comic is a guy called Vincent Keyes. He's a former soldier turned politician who's built his own army. Everything with him is a spoiler, so we won't be discussing him much. But I will say he has a right-hand man that hasn't been introduced yet, but he is also but that is also a core character. Also, why the comic is even called Book of the Traitor. The comic revolves around said book, which is related to the Dark Interlopers from Twilight Princess, but anything else relating to the book is a spoiler.
I am looking forward to whenever we loop back to Vincent, though. He's a lot of fun to draw.
He's going to be an interesting character. He's a guy I'm constantly reworking what is he even about, because I don't want him to just be a generic villain. Character is asking, this is basically Legend of Zelda, but Metal Gear. You know? Not too far off. I mean, we got Snake and Otacon. They're basically married in Guns of the Patriots. But Link and Mike don't want children. That's one thing. So let's see. So some things to note about the comic. So it's based a lot around fan theories, especially those relating to the Sheikah and the Dark Interlopers. Part of why this comic part of why I started developing this into a actual story and a comic, even though I've had these characters floating around in my head in a bunch of different stories for years, in some form or another. A lot of that comes about because fans like to theorize about a lot of things. In more recent years, especially with YouTube, it's kind of become insufferable. But especially with like Twilight Princess, Wind Waker, there's a lot of little details that the developers didn't, I guess, think too much about, or at least they put them in because they thought they'd be cool. But then fans saw that and connected it to other things and thought, that's interesting and makes a lot of sense in cool ways. Like, there's a theory that the civil war that happens in the backstory of Ocarina of Time is also the same war with the Dark Interlopers in Twilight Princess, and there's not really anything to say that that's necessarily true, but that's an idea that people had. And yeah, thanks, Pat. But it's an interesting idea if it were the same, if that was the same war. And so that's what the comic goes with. The comic does say that is the same war that happened the same. That was at the same time, and that's also part of the comic. So the comic talks a lot about, or the comic is based a lot on Twilight Princess, especially Twilight Princess and Ocarina of Time, those two big ones. And there's also a lot of theories about the Sheikah, because in up until Breath of the Wild, we didn't see them very much. Like, there were only in Ocarina of Time, and it was only one person. It seemed like all the others were wiped out. But, like, in Wind Waker, you go to the Pirate's Fortress, you would see, like, the eyeball symbol around. So, like, there's theories that the pirates were also Sheikah. So there was a lot to read into, or at least a lot to consider. And so the comic is based a lot around little fan theories like that, stuff that I've sort of built on or incorporated to tell this story. Another thing to note is that the comic is an adventure. There's an adventure going on, but it's also almost equally, if not more so, a character study. Because, like I said, I've had these characters sort of in my head a long time, and I've been formulating what they're about, what they're like for so long, almost more than the actual story, that a lot of the comic is just, stepping back, taking a break, letting the characters be characters, and sort of developing their personalities, their motivations. So, like, Chapter 2, they're mostly in the apartment, except at the end when they're in the cabin. It's a lot of talking. I wanted to keep interesting, and I wanted to stay interesting, so there's a lot of adventure, but there is also a lot of just character development. So it's It's a bit of both. I'm leaning more towards adventure these days because I've sort of formulated what the characters are about now, so I'm trying to keep it interesting at least. And also, like, without really spoiling anything, I do want to mention that one of the core themes of the comic that I've built up, or that I've built a lot of the character development and their personal issues, their motivations. It's based a lot around a theme of identity, and so like you're going to notice that, like we're going to talk about Mike. That has a lot to do with him. Like Sheik, he's an ancient Sheikah in the modern day. What does that mean for him? What does that mean for his beliefs? Things like that, like going without spoiling it. Like also Nick, I said he's sort of like his evil twin, and in chapter 1, Mike pretty much immediately figures out, so that's Link, but he's not Link, because like Nick is basically a science project of some sort. Like, not gonna say how it happens, but he's like he's like a formulated evil twin that Vincent made of Link. So like, what would that mean for Nick? How does he develop his own sense of identity when he's literally built off of someone else? So stuff like that. The character study part of it has a lot to do with identity. So it's Garrett Gear says, caught up on the comic. I really like these semi-modernized outfits they have. That was pretty much all lore. That was one of his ideas.
I have a lot of fun kind of adapting, basically designing outfits for them that still provide a lot of nods to various canon.
Also says, I also like that Sheik isn't doing the whole "what is that" to every modern thing. Yeah, there's going to be a little bit of that, but Sheik is sort of a no-nonsense character. He's got a job, and he's focused on the job. And I feel like he could put 2 and 2 together after some point. Let's see. So I'm going to talk a little bit about. Let's talk a little bit about the comics history, because, like I said, been in my head for years. It should surprise no one that the comic does have roots in fan fiction. It's a fan comic. It's fan fiction with pictures. But I didn't always like. I did write fan fiction when I was young, but not Zelda fan fiction. I wrote Sonic fan fiction. And not just any Sonic fan fiction, Sonic X fan fiction. And like, I found an old hard drive, and I was able to get some stuff on it. A lot of it was corrupted, but I still had some of that old Sonic X fan fiction. And it's weird because I could still write, so it wasn't completely horrible. But I had still had some dumb ideas. But I did do some fan fiction. After a point, I tried writing a Zelda fan fiction. It would have been a Link and Sheik shipping fic. I've always been a supporter of them. I've always shipped them. That only lasted one chapter. I started writing the second one. I never finished it. But there's a little bit of that in the comic. It's like, especially with Nick, actually, because in that fan fiction, Sheik was actually sort of like a piece of Zelda from the adult timeline of Ocarina of Time, who got corrupted by some sort of evil and had to be split off from Zelda, and like she banished her to she banished that Sheik to a different dimension, but ultimately ended up where Link, the young Link who got sent back in time, ended up. But Link removes the corruption from Sheik, so now Sheik is sort of just an empty shell, and over time slowly starts developing her own identity. And that sort of got carried over into Nick, who's not quite an empty shell, but that he's sort of following that thought. I don't know, like that. I think that was 2011 or 2012. Around that point, I think by that point I was already reading plenty of like shipping fics. I like Link and Sheik, but also Link and Midna. I think I forgot to put it down, but I should mention one of the reasons why the comic carries on from Twilight Princess specifically is because that little quote-unquote timeline, Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, and Twilight Princess, I've always been most connected to those. Like, quality aside or how well they hold up aside, because Twilight Princess, it's flawed.
Yeah.
I love it personally, but it's very flawed. I'm re-recording it for a Let's Play of Twilight Princess HD. A lot of it doesn't hold up very well. But personally, in a nostalgic sense, I'm quite connected to those three games, and Majora's Mask is still my personal favorite of the whole franchise.
And I mean, games can very easily be formative without necessarily holding up well years later.
Yeah, and I think even with Twilight Princess, because it's so flawed, it's interesting to discuss, because there is a lot to it. And Wind Waker, it's such a good game, but you bring it up, you have to mention, like the Tingle side quest. You have to mention getting the piece of the Triforce.
Tingle.
Flaws invite discussion, so there's a lot to talk about.
This is true.
So, yeah, I would look up fan fictions occasionally. Not all of them are great. Occasionally, I'd find a really good one. Like there's a Lincoln Midna shipping fanfic I think it's called Heroes of Time. That I like. It's blatantly about the romance of Link and Midna, like after Twilight Princess, how they reconnect, something like that. But I really liked that, and it had a few ideas that I don't know if they're still gonna find their way into the comic, but there were some things I wanted to borrow from it. I don't know if they're still gonna be in there. But that was sort of one of the roots of what eventually became the comic. But the big one is actually a series of fanfics. The first one's called Soulmates. I think he just generally calls it the Soul Trilogy. But it's a Link and Sheik shipping fanfic. It's what would happen if Sheik was his own separate character from Zelda, and when Link went into the Water Temple, the Shadow Link killed Navi, stole Link's Triforce of Courage, and became his own character and his own villain. And so Sheik had to take up the mantle of guiding Link, taking him eventually to defeat Ganon. But it starts out kind of rough. It's very much rushing to get Link and Sheik together as a couple. But a few chapters in, once the author really got his rhythm down, it was written so well, and it expanded Ocarina of Time so widely with so many characters, so many different plots. It practically rewrote Ocarina of Time. It's in a very interesting and very well-written way, and I actually became very attached to it. And then when the story's completed, by the time the story's completed, he basically formed his own alternate universe. And then, so there are 2 sequels to that, which are such emotional roller coasters that they literally made me depressed for a week. They got so rough. I had to stop reading them. It was too much. I had anxiety crushing me while I was sitting in recording studio class. They got so intense. And I think the Soulmate story, I think that series is done now. And he's doing other alternate universe stuff. But he's a remarkably good writer. I should look him up. But it's on fanfiction.net. It's called Soulmates. It's Link and Sheik. I think on TV Tropes, it's in one of the recommended fanfictions. Or it's one of the recommended fanfictions in that tab. So, so those 2 fanfics sort of gave me the idea of maybe writing another fanfic and trying it. Soulmates, 2 separate words. There's a space. So those fanfics sort of gave me the idea of maybe trying it again, maybe taking some of the characters that have been in my head and formulating them into a proper story. But it feels like fanfiction has kind of come and gone as far as something that people would really notice and read. And then my friend Travis recommended me a webcomic called The Legend of Zelda Demon Road, drawn by Stefan Hunter. And the art is so good, the story is so interesting that it's after I rediscovered it, maybe after Steph went on a hiatus and came back, I decided, I should do a fan comic now. It'd be so much more interesting because it would be it would be the stories, but that visual aspect would, I I feel like, could connect readers even more than just the words. Um, so that's when I decided, all right, problem is I can't draw, so what do I do? And, and around that point, we on TheStrawhatNO, we started getting fan fiction from an artist called An Artist Complex on Tumblr, aka Olivia. A couple listeners might know her. She had a really good art style. It was she could sort of she had a very similar art style to a lot of the Legend of Zelda, and I thought it would be really cool to bring her in. What did I say? Yeah, fan art. Fan art. What did I say? Did I say something else? But yeah, Olivia would submit fan art of TheStrawhatNO's Let's Plays to us on our Tumblr account. And her art was really good, and it was very similar to what I would have liked to have in a webcomic. So I reached out to her and said, would you be interested in starting a comic with me? Oh, fanfic. Yeah, she submitted fan art. And she was actually down for it. So that was late 2013. This was around the Skyward Sword Let's Play. So for the next year or so, she would come up with concept art and a bunch of different ideas. I think this is around the point when she painted the prologue for what became the comic. Around the time she said yes, I actually started formulating an actual story that would eventually become Book of the Traitor as we know it. But 2014, 2015, nothing really progressed with the comic, unfortunately. And also, I should mention that a few months in, Olivia and I did start dating. There's kind of an even arc between when she and I started the comic, we started dating. Olivia had to leave the comic because she couldn't. She had trouble actually starting it, and eventually she just like, I don't think I'm going to be able to work on it. So she had to drop out, and then a few months later we broke up. So it's actually a very even arc, weirdly enough. So like at the start of 2016, I think it was looking kind of dire. I was feeling like it feels like this comic's never going to actually kick off. And like I put up a post on Tumblr on Smack Jeeves, I think. Yeah, saying I'm looking for a new artist, and a month or two passed, and nobody was biting. But luckily, I want to say in March, Lore showed up.
That's me.
It's you. Like I said, like I told you, I'm going to be yakking a lot, and I apologize.
Nah, don't worry about it. But I actually spent a few days thinking about whether or not to respond to that, because hell, for all I knew, you'd already found someone.
No, it was really feeling like I would just have to give up, like right until you showed up and said, "Hey, I might be interested."
See, that's funny, because I was, I saw that you were looking for someone. I was just like, huh, that's kind of exactly the opportunity I've been waiting for / looking for, because like I already knew you could write. I already knew that you had a track record of finishing projects and like actually being able to stick to them. There was clearly a lot of commitment in the comic, and I'd been watching your Let's Play channel for a while, so I was just like, huh, sure, let's give it a shot.
Yeah, like so, you sent in a few like test pictures of the characters, some things like that. I think you did a little bit of your own concept art. In fact, my free compilation Quero, that cover art is Lore's concept art for Redeads. I just asked, hey, can I repurpose it? Because like it's fucking rad.
Oh yeah, I'd forgotten I'd done that.
And then I also put it on the back cover for Book of the Traitor. Or Book of the Traitor? No, Buried Secrets. They both start with B, that's why. Back cover for Buried Secrets and Old Lies, my album. But yeah, luckily, so Lore joined up a few months later. And then, like in September, the comic started for real, and it's been going semi-consistently ever since. And it's so cool to have this happening finally. and so consistently too.
I've definitely been enjoying having a really consistent project to keep me working. And it's been really nice to see how much I've improved just over the course of it.
Yeah, I think you pointed out like the coloring in the first chapter, comparing that with how richly you color in chapter 2 now.
I remember one of the early pages in chapter one, I was sending you messages like, I don't know if I can do this when I started shading it.
I think it came out good, but you definitely have kept getting better.
Oh, yeah. Just needed the practice. And we'll continue to.
Yeah, which I think is a good transition to the process for how it goes from in my head to it being a full page. Um, so it's worth saying that I've been writing chapter 3 now for like 2 or 3 years,
A long ass time.
and part of it, I don't know if procrastination is the right word necessarily. It's more that I've got so much happening. I've got the Let's Plays. I'm back into recording music again. So when I have Book of the Traitor in my head, I really have to sit down and focus on it for a good long while. But also, as I'm writing the script, I'm also coming up with, much later in the comic, things that are going to happen later, little conversations that I put down in like this conversation vault that sometimes I think, no, I don't want to do that. So like I cut that out and put it in a different text file and write something new. And even with chapter 3, only this year did I finalize how the first half of it would go, and only like this last month I finalized how I want the second half to go, but I still need to write it now. So I'm doing a lot of mental gymnastics just writing a script. But once the script is actually finished, I can send it to Lore.
Yep. And so once he sends me the script, that's when I start doing layout. And I always feel a little bad when I send Thorn layout because it's not in any kind of remotely useful order. I have to send him a text file along with it so that he has any idea what's going on.
It's like it's
Because
panels, like
it's
it's like the
individual panels that
yeah.
are like they're not in any real order because working from the beginning to the end just doesn't really function for me. I'll hit a point, get stuck, and then just stop dead if I can't jump around. So what I do is I basically like work out the panels that I have the best idea of. Whether it's this should be at the top of a page or I just have a really clear image for one line. And then I kind of fill in around that based on how much space is going to be between things. It's kind of like assembling a puzzle. You go for the edges and all the bits that are the same color first, except I'm making the puzzle pieces as I go along.
That can only
Uh,
make it harder.
well, it works fine. So that stage is actually done on that page is that part's actually done with pencil and paper, with like a huge drawing pad because it lets me see a lot more than a computer screen, which is helpful. So once I'm done with that, that's when it kicks into the computer and sketch, line art, color. All of that happens using a tablet. And then I send the finished product off to Thorn. He catches a few mistakes that I've managed to miss usually, and then it goes up.
Usually, sometimes I miss things too.
Well, there is that. But usually, sometimes I catch everything. There's a few mistakes that are really common for me to make. Jewelry, painted details, anything that's had a small change. Those are really easy for me to miss.
Yeah, like their wedding rings have disappeared and reappeared a few times.
Yeah, they have.
But it is cool seeing the process as it goes along because Lore sends me the basic sketch first, then like then sometime later sends me the inked version, and then finally the colored version, which then gets uploaded.
I'll send a bit of. I'll put a bit of a breakdown of that up somewhere at some point because it is kind of fun to watch a page come together, and then you can see how much of a mess the initial layout is.
Yeah, yeah. I wanted to share something like that for a while now. I guess now's as good a time as any. So I think that covers the grand picture overall. Before we continue, do you folks have any questions? Folks in the chat? Kimberly Kelsey says, so a brainstorm log, basically. Oh, and question for Lore. Off the subject at hand, how do you go about character bios?
How do you mean? Are you talking about, like, written backstory, or are you talking about how I decide the way they look and move?
Because for me, writing them, it's like a constant revision process. Lore can attest to this. Every month, there's going to be, at least once, there's going to be just a wall of text of me, like, I've come up with this idea, and like 5 other ideas that builds off of it.
Okay, so how they look. So I usually go for some combo of just generally how I see that character in my head. I try to make sure they've got a few distinguishing facial features, and a lot of it was actually based, at least loosely based off of Olivia's original sketches. Like I just kind of took that and translated it to my style. In terms of how they move, because for me that's a big part of how characters look. I'm probably drawing most heavily from Wind Waker for various people, but you know, there's bits of Ocarina of Time. I'm bits of Majora's Mask. I'm sure there's bits of Breath of the Wild starting to creep in as well.
The lobster shirt has certainly shown up.
Yeah, that one was Thorn specifically requesting it.
Oh yeah, that's right. I think that maybe it was Olivia's idea, but I originally envisioned the lobster shirt as being Link's, like it's Link's shirt, but Mike stole it to use it as pajamas.
And now it's been regifted slash used on Nick.
Yep.
Uh, so the characters do keep evolving as I draw them. Because like Mike's design uses a lot more curves than it used to. It's just, you know, that's how his hair went, and it's translated a bit to his facial features as well. It's the kind of thing where basically the more you draw a character, the more you'll get to know them, kind of.
Mike and his brother Tracy both have a lot of Jarvis Cocker in them,
Yep.
intentionally. Um, it is pretty cool. I give Lore a lot of leeway in deciding how it's going to look because that's entirely his place to begin with. So it's cool writing out a character, writing out a scene, and like a new character shows up, like the old woman that Sheik meets at the start of chapter 2. It's not what I had in mind, but it was cool seeing Lore's idea, and now that is pretty much what's in my mind now. So
Hey!
it's like you're rewriting what's in my head sometimes.
I mean, that sort of thing happens a decent amount anyway. I mean, just think of all the various movie versions you've seen of books. That tends to change how I see the character whenever I reread them.
Yeah.
But I enjoy having a lot of leeway, though I do occasionally ask you to basically point a direction for me to start running in. Because
Yeah.
I really like having the creative freedom and deciding how things look, but every now and then I'm just like, okay, that's a little too open-ended.
Any other questions before we continue? Regarding like the overall development of the comic. After this point, we're going to go into more specifics on characters and what have you. We can wait a minute. I think like while we wait for that, we can say so. Chapter 2 is finished. Right now, we're taking a little bit of a break. You want to resume the comic in June?
Yeah, I'm not sure when in June. It's going to depend a little bit on when I actually, you know, stop procrastinating and get working on the prologue.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah, that's what we're going to be doing next. Laura's going to be redoing the prologue.
oh, and for anyone who's curious about it, a page takes anywhere from 12 to 20 hours start to finish, although I'm not really counting the initial layout in that because I do that for the entire chapter at once.
And the process overall, at least as far as like the individual images that Laura sends me, it could take about a week to 2 weeks, depending.
Yeah, it's been a little slower the last few times because argle blargle real life, but
Yeah.
I'm hoping to at least get back to every other week by the time we start chapter 3.
Gregor House is something, but it's more advice than anything. Well, now I'm worried. Gregory School, I'm sure it's fine, but yeah, we can wait for that later, I guess. But let's continue. So, I did mention a couple times that Link and Mike are married. I didn't decide that immediately, though. So, early on in the comic, as I started developing it, the idea was that Link and Mike would just be very close friends, and like you would get the hint that maybe there was some romantic attachment there, but not quite sure. Up until a point where like they would be arguing like an old married couple, because of course they would do that, and then somebody would joke, "Geez, are you two married yet?" And they at the same time they would both say yes and continue arguing.
Okay, I like that.
It would have been a good joke, I think, but after a point, like I'm always reading about queer and trans representation, so I thought, if we are going with the idea that they are romantically connected and even married, what's the sense in keeping that hidden? So when chapter 1 was written, I was still going with the idea that they were very close, maybe secretly romantically involved, but by the time chapter 2 started, I decided, no, this should be front and center. There's no reason to hide this. So like dialed up the affection between them. So like first couple pages they're kissing. Dialed it up to 10, not to 11, because then they'd be banging in the alley every chapter, and we can't do that. But
It's also kind of nice to have a story with a couple that like actually handles shit together,
yeah,
because in a lot of stories the romance will be something where like, oh, and then at the very end they get together and it's all rainbows and puppies and they ride off into the sunset. You don't actually get to see them do the work of a relationship.
yeah, I think it was part of that too. I think I wanted them to be together in some capacity, but there's all of the baggage, there's all of the tediousness that comes with romantic arcs that I thought I just want to skip that. I just want to go to them being lovely together, and I really enjoy it. Their relationship and them being together is something I've enjoyed the most about chapter 2.
Yeah, they're drawing those two together is a lot of fun.
Brenna came in right at they'd be banging in the alley every chapter.
Context.
Do you need a recap, Brenna? Brenna's okay. All right. All right, but that's Link and Mike being married. Another thing, now this is something that hasn't come into the comic because it was sort of a similar mental process, but Mike is actually transgender. Mike is a trans man, and like Link and Mike being married, how I didn't really decide to make that at the forefront until chapter 2, I didn't decide that with Mike until chapter 3, which will be coming up next. And the reason that I'm saying that now is because, along with me reading about queer couples sort of being pushed to the back, I've been reading about reading and seeing about trans people in media, how them being trans is treated as a surprise. It's some big dramatic reveal, and
It's just a giant headache.
it's so has no place in this comic, frankly. So even though I didn't decide to have that be open and clear at the front until until recently, that will be That will be pretty much directly stated in Chapter 3. Like, Mike's going to say that to Sheik, because Sheik's the only one who doesn't know. And then Sheik's going to deal with it. He'll be able to handle it, and they'll move on from there. It won't be a big deal. I can't remember why I decided to make Mike trans necessarily. I think
it was definitely in place even before I joined.
that's true. Yeah. Oh no, what I decided by the time you joined, I was still going with the idea that it would be a surprise or at least a reveal later on in the comic. Mike would reveal it to Sheik, and it would be sort of this bonding moment between them because Sheik would sort of deal. He would be able to understand. He would be cool with it, but there's no reason to keep that hidden. I can't remember why I decided to make Mike trans necessarily, because this isn't a spoiler either. Like, he has the Triforce of Wisdom. Mike is the quote-unquote Zelda of this particular generation. In fact, his dead name is Zelda, so he is that character. He's just trans male. But I think part of why I came to that is because there's always been a character named Mike in my head. But I think he's always been cis male until I started writing this comic, and I thought it'd be much more interesting if he was the Zelda of this generation. He was just trans, and it sort of ended up that way. I think he would have been still like the holder of the Triforce of Wisdom, but it would have been I thought it'd be more interesting to have him be trans. And here he goes. I think that covers it. I feel like I'm missing something about it though. If it comes to me, I'll be sure to edit it in later. Now, another thing about Sheik. So, in this comic, Sheik is his own separate character, and he is... I'm still kind of deciding whether he should be conclusively male, and we'll talk about why in the next bit, but... The important thing is, this Sheik is a separate character. It is not Zelda in disguise like an Ocarina of Time.
God, I remember the debates about that. Those got ridiculous.
Yeah, but coming from those debates were like with that Link and Sheik shipping fanfic, and especially in fanfiction, it's pretty common for Sheik to be a separate character from Zelda, and even sometimes like Zelda. I read one fanfic where Zelda drew on a spirit who became Sheik sort of for her. So that I just thought I thought it would be an interesting idea for Sheik to be his own autonomous character, and even sort of to come from the time before Ocarina of Time. So like there would be an idea of what if Impa from Ocarina of Time knew a Sheik like who looked like that, and then so when Ganondorf took over, Impa had the idea of disguising Zelda as that Sheik, something like that. As far as him being conclusively male, I'm leaning a little more towards maybe like Sheik is sort of non-binary or gender neutral, or at least it's not really something he's thought about that much. I'll think about it more, because like every chapter is going, let's do better representation here, so by the end I'll have figured it out. Which does bring me to the next bit. I titled this segment, Oops, They're All Men.
Because oops.
Now, I am a feminist. I can't stand people who are bashful about that or like are cautious about saying that. I'm a feminist. I support not only women's rights, but also that femininity in general is not less or something inherently bad in comparison to masculinity or in general. They're equal to me. So why did I make all the main characters men? That was totally an accident. I should say that. Thorn's comic doesn't pass the Bechdel test. Kind of, at least right now. So, like, even the lead female character, Zelda, I made into a trans man. It's like, I didn't do that intentionally. What it is pretty boys are my thing. Just saying it out there. So, like, let's all have the main cast. Sheik, like, I purposefully as we were designing Sheik, both with Olivia and Laura, I had to emphasize Sheik is very pretty,
Oh
and
no, make them prettier.
literally happened with both of you. And also with both of you, you told me that just makes them harder to draw.
Yes! It does!
um, but after a point, I did sort of realize that. I think it was around the time that I think the game's called Puppeteer. Somebody had asked, why is the puppet considered male? And I think like the developer reacted badly. It was kind of a knee-jerk, snippy reaction when really you could. There's nothing wrong with just saying it. Just kind of ended up that way. But after me realizing that had happened with the comic, I am putting more effort into having interesting and story important female characters in the comic as it goes on. So like it's like there's the woman, she's obviously based off of the Happy Mask Salesman, the woman that Sheik thought was a seer. I purposely wanted her to be female. A lot of the chapters, the people that are working with the main cast are going to be women, and that's sort of going to be the end of it. They're not going to be held back because they're women. It's not going to be a problem, basically. So I'm trying to mitigate it, though it's not. It doesn't quite make up for there not really being any lead female characters, but that's sort of how it ended up, and I'm trying to make up for it now. Greg House says, I honestly thought, while trying to write, I only made two great personalities to two of my main male characters, and the females I kept flip-flopping on. Oh, Kara Gear has a question. I feel like we both can answer this. Are the other non-Hylian human races around in the comics present day? Would that be a spoiler? I don't think it is, because, well, yes, they are around, but... What was that?
That's more up to you whether it's a spoiler or not.
Well, yes, they are around, but, things have happened with them. We'll say that. I think that covers that, and, who was it in the... up above? Earlier, before the stream started, John Tolbert asked, will Groose be in it? No, I hadn't planned it, but,
See, now I'm just tempted to stick him in the background somewhere in a random panel.
You could. There might be a few returning Zelda characters. If you followed the old Tumblr account, which is still active, it's mostly just posting relinks back to the Smack Jeeves webpage. But really far back, there was all of Olivia's concept art, and like there are some returning enemies and what have you. And she had ideas for like a Pikmin beetle, which is just a tiny beetle. I don't know if that's going to be in the comic, but like there will be a Scarecrow who will explicitly look like the Scarecrow's Ocarina of Time. He's going to be in the...
I am looking forward to that so much.
We've had a lot of fun with that character.
It's a shame that he's not going to pop up for a while, but oh man.
Groose would make an awesome greaser. But there might be a few things that might recognize, like when they get to the forest, there'll be Skull Kids, things like that.
I mean, I've definitely already made a couple. Main one I'm thinking of right now is when Sheik's first walking through Kakariko. You can see him kind of looking at a sign for some shop, and it says Telma's.
Ah. I didn't catch that.
Well, it is half cut off. Doing little things like that is just fun for me.
I did catch that Link's sleep shirt is for Lon Lon Ranch.
Yep.
It's very hard to read, though.
Yeah, that's just the way that the page ended up getting shaded. It's always a little weird shading pages because each time that I had kind of a new scene or a new lighting condition, I'll try something new, and first couple of pages it's great, and then the rest of the pages I spend learning what all the drawbacks are, and then I apply that to the next scene.
But I don't think there might be a few specific returning characters, but saying which ones would probably be a spoiler. For the most part, there might be like references to particular characters. Like the old woman, an obvious reference to the Happy Mask Salesman. But not so much explicitly that character, necessarily. Carrick did ask, or did say you could easily have a lot of background lore gags. Mind if I suggest a few? Well, what suggestions would you have had? Renato, yeah, you practically missed the whole podcast. Don't worry, I'll edit it down and upload it. And also, I'm gonna leave the stream as is, me fumbling over myself and all. But I'm probably going to upload a video version of the edited version to my personal account. Same with the previous two podcast episodes. But don't worry, once the podcast is done, which won't be too far from here. We're about done here, actually. Once the stream has processed, I'll set it to public, and you can re-listen to it. But that covers everything on our list. Do you folks have any more questions? So, like we talked about the grand scheme, the grand image of the comic, anything that isn't a spoiler, and then we talked a bit about the character specifically. So, like in chapter 2, we met Mike's brother Tracy. I guess not too much of a spoiler. It kind of relates to Mike being trans, but he's got some problems with his family. Tracy's like the one that gets it, and he's cool. I did mention that all the main characters have issues of some sort. One of character suggestions: Tingle as a one-off cartoon character you see for like one panel in the background. Like on TV or a poster ad, right?
I mean, if Tingle does show up at all, it'll either be as that or as like a truly terrifying children's toy.
Like in Skyward Sword.
Oh, jeez, I'd forgotten about that.
Kimberly Kelsey says, when you said pretty boys, I imagine them looking like the pretty boys in Gravitation. That is a yaoi anime, isn't it?
I think so. I vaguely recognize the name.
Not far off, I guess. Another character suggestion, maybe like some clothes referencing the fashion Zelda game whose name I can't remember. I don't know what that refers to.
Is that Triforce Heroes? The one where you wear costumes to modify your stats?
Probably. 'Cause I thought it'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, they meant Triforce Heroes. I was thinking like a browser game where you dress up Link or something.
I'm sure they exist.
Niperold says, I think I saw a Gus jar or something. I don't recall.
I don't think I put one in on purpose. Who knows, there might still be something that looks like one in the background.
A movie theater in the background showing Hero of Time. No. Or maybe, actually. I kind of want to work in Why Am I in Danger in there somewhere. And last suggestion from Karagear. Background decorative pod second reference to different pots from games, and even a background jar store.
What, like put a pottery barn in?
Oh, maybe. That link has been banned from. Bob510 asks, were any pots smashed in the making of this comic? No. I feel like around the time it started, maybe earlier in the year, in 2013, that was around the point that I did punch through my window. If
I'm
that
sorry,
counts.
what?
You didn't know about this?
I don't think I did, no.
So, like, this was the start of 2013. I've always had annoying dogs next door, and depending on which ones, I would sometimes like knock on the wall or slap it or something. So like just to so that just so they would hear it and stop barking, or I would yell at them. That particular day, I got so annoyed I just stood up. My intent was just to knock on the window. Instead, I punched right through it.
Whoops.
And that was the last time I knocked on the wall or the window to shut dogs up. Now I just stick to yelling, "Shut up." Oh, that's kind of a cool idea from Carrot Gear. An I Believe alien poster with the Majora's Mask Flatwood aliens.
Eh.
I like that idea. I kind of want that. Something like that. I don't know where, though. It did hurt a little bit. I got a small cut for the most part, but it healed up and now it's a scar there. Right on the upper joint of my index finger. I was thinking about it. I'm kind of jumping around here, but going back to that I Believe poster idea. Thinking about it, the comic has a lot to do with Ocarina of Time and Twilight Princess, not as much to do with Majora's Mask, even though that's my favorite. Oh, I thought of something worth mentioning. So, like I said, I've been playing this comic for years, long before Breath of the Wild came out, and did a lot of things that I'd wanted to do first. Things like the concept of identity. Zelda in that comic, she can't develop her powers because she's being stifled by her father. And and Mike being trans in this comic, he had pushback from his parents, and now they don't talk anymore. So not necessarily the same thing, but like also Zelda in that is a scholar. She's interested in history. In this, Mike is he's a student he's very into physics. He's getting a degree in physics.
And I think before you made him a physics major, he was studying history or something.
I think he'd always been studying physics, but yeah.
I just remember getting. It's funny, after Breath of the Wild came out and as you were playing it, I remember getting a lot of messages of seriously, they hit on this? Like,
Yeah.
like it was a good type of annoy, but it was getting pretty funny just how many of the beats they hit.
Like so I forgot to mention this earlier, but another fan theory is that the Dark Interlopers from Twilight Princess are a sect of the Sheikah. I think because there's also a lot of eyeball iconography with the Dark Interlopers. So,
And then the Yiga showed up.
yep, we're going with that idea in Book of the Traitor, and then the Yiga showed up, who are an evil sect of the Sheikah. So, it's like I came up with those ideas because I thought Zelda would never go there, and then they went there. Oh boy. Gregor House has a question. I have issues beginning a story. The general idea is a lighthearted story that tends to very bleak based around the idea of loss. Any writing trappings I should avoid? Huh.
The idea that you have to get it right the first time.
Yeah.
Just start somewhere that you have a clear idea of, write until you get stuck, and then jump to another point if you have to. You don't have to do one and done.
It's kind of
Also, don't be too married to any ideas. Like, keep a separate file for anything you want to keep, but, like, if it doesn't work, I don't care how much you like it, just trash.
pretty much exactly describing my writing for the comic. It's like I'll get hung up on a chapter, but I'll have entire conversations for way later, entirely scripted out in a separate text file.
Welcome to why I'm so happy someone else is doing the writing. That's always the part I struggle with most.
Yeah.
Ideas? No problem. Getting it down on paper? Fuck.
Yep. That's why I stopped writing fanfiction, because I always had ideas for later in the story, never how to get there. Which is part of why it's nice that with the comic, once I finish the script, I can sort of sit back, let the pages come in slowly over time, which gives me time to think about how the next chapter is going to go and eventually write it out.
Yeah, having time to work is. I mean, it's definitely an important part of my process, even just making the pages themselves. You're welcome, Gregory.
Pop510 says, as an oral storyteller, it pisses off my writing friends that I don't write anything down. I don't think I could do that. I would forget everything. I think I have a bunch of different ideas right now for the comic that I haven't written down, and I need to, or I'm going to forget them.
Kimberly says, procrastination on my end when doing a project. I definitely have those issues as well. I find that working with someone else helps keep me on track. It doesn't stop me from doing it, but it does mean that I at least keep inching forward instead of just stopping in place because there's someone else depending on.
I try not to be a burden on you, though.
No, you're really not. If anything, I'm the one apologizing when I say, "Hey, I need another week for this."
I try to give, like, I say try, I don't think I've ever told you, no, get the comic out. But,
Not once.
go ahead.
No, no, you've been really great about it whenever I asked for a bit of extra time.
It's partly because, like, in the early days of the Midnight Frogs, I was very stubborn, and, like, I would take it personally when someone wasn't around, and that's just not fair. Everyone has their own lives. And, like, you've had things just constantly happening over on your end, so.
And I mean, like, the being able to just kind of sit back and let people take their own time is a hard lesson to learn. Takes a while.
Gregor House says, I finalized what I wanted to do based on Skies of Arcadia and Breath of the Wild. The hero wakes up a year after the world has been shattered.
Certainly a fun idea. Actually, I think the Skies of Arcadia LP is the one that you guys were just starting when I started watching your channel.
Probably right around then. That was 2015, wasn't it?
No, quite a bit earlier than that. I've been watching you for. Well, that's a good question. Now I want to look.
Oh, I went to the LP archive to look it up, and one of the featured LPs is the first LP of Twilight Princess.
Welp.
Looking forward to redoing that one. Let's see. Yeah, Skies of Arcadia started February 2015.
Huh. Yeah, I mean, like, I'd watched the Pikmin 2 LP before that, because, like, when I went into the archive, when I, went into your upload videos, I was just like, oh, hey, I recognize that. This is a good place. I'm gonna stick around.
Hey.
I think it's worked out.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad. Like, a lot of people still love Pikmin 2. I feel like a lot of the humor was just way too crass. But at least like you got a good first impression from that.
Yeah. And I mean, anytime you have older work, like, you're always evolving on what you can do, and so it's hard not to look back on old stuff and go, ooh, at the difference.
Kimberly Kelsey says, I had an entire story, well, at least volume one, ready to be put on paper, but decided I would wait on them. And when I finally got to the story, I forgot everything outside of the title.
Ouch.
That's why I write everything down that I come up with, like weird little lyrics that have no connection to anything, weird song titles. I put them down in a text file just in case I can use them later. Buried Secrets and Old Lies and World Builder were both made out of weird little things I just written down in text files. Neprold says he saw the Gus jar on page 48. I need to look there.
Air cannon that Mike and his classmates are working on.
Ah, okay. I guess you consider that a Gus jar. Well, I know what I'm going to be watching after this is over, the Skies of Arcadia LP again. I've been meaning to forever.
It's a fun one.
Actually, what I should do what I did with the Ni no Kuni LP, where I watch it as I'm like I just put all of the episodes into Vegas and then line them up and watch them, and then start cutting out all the good parts to make the best of compilation. Because I wanted to do that with Skies of Arcadia forever. Character says, I have some semi-fleshed out ideas, but I have a really bad habit of tangenting into really, really unimportant stuff and non-important jokey stuff. Well, like, the side stuff is the world building. That's what defines the characters and the setting. So, like unless it's really unimportant, but all the
And I
little...
mean, even if it doesn't make it into the final product, it's still, it still helps develop the world the story's getting into. So,
little things can help inform where the important stuff goes. Yeah, but I tangent from one little thing to another little thing. I mean, I do too, kind of.
that's what editing is for.
Yeah. I mean, write it all down somewhere, but then once you go to write the story or the script, that's where you can focus things up. I mean, anytime I send lore a wall of text, even if it's just one idea, I'm always jumping around what other things it connects to and what other things it changes.
And that doesn't mean the wall of text contains just one idea
Yeah.
either.
Oh, one fun little update. Yoshi has sent me the first 5 parts for Star Fox Adventures, so that'll be starting soon.
Ooh, excellent.
I don't know why I don't have you added as a mod yet already, but there you go. Just in case. The chat tends to be pretty cool. We don't tend to need moderators, but just in case.
Yeah, I think when you asked me last time, I was just like, I'll take the partial responsibility role, not the full one, but that's totally fine. Oh, you mean here? I brain good.
Yeah, well, both. It's kind of the same idea. Partial responsibility in that nothing's probably going to happen. It's just in case if you're around, but I'm not, and something's going down.
Yep.
Now, the YouTube chats and even the Discord server both tend to be pretty cool. Like, we even had a few people had like a serious discussion the other day, and it was totally calm and collected. First time that's happened in years.
On the internet? Is it even possible?
It is now.
Amazing.
I do have a Discord server. I can post the invite link. Let's see. If you join, be sure to read the rules. They're not huge. They're not hugely restrictive. The general idea is just don't be a dick. Like, we had one person come in, and within a day, immediately was like, man, I hate SJWs. If that's you, don't join the server. All right, but I feel like we're about ready to wrap it up.
All right.
So thank you all for listening in. Thank you, Laura, for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for the years of working on this comic for me, with me as well, for nothing.
Like I said, it's been a really good project for me as well.
Like, I even told you, like, right when you came in, like, we're not gonna make any money from this. This is just gonna be pure passion.
I mean, duh.
Yeah, but still, just wanted to clarify. But all right. So next week, I'm going to resume talking about my music. We're going to be talking about my last 2 records, Buried Secrets and Old Lies, and World Builder, which came out just 2 months ago, to the date, actually, of recording this. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going to happen with later music projects this very year. So that's going to be next Wednesday, May 8th. Hope you all listen in then. Until then, I have been a thorn in your brain.